Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. On Perpetual Chess, I have weekly conversations with the chess world's best players, promoters, and educators about their lives, careers, current projects, and best practices. For more information, go to perpetualchesspod.com. I'm here with Kostya Kavutskiy, recently crowned International Master. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, Ben.
I've been reading your work for a while now, so I was happy to see that you just earned the International Master title. I know you've been working hard for it. We will get to that. But first I wanted, as I often do, now I can say often now that I've had 3 interviews, talk about where you came from, how you got into chess, and everything like that.
Sure, yeah. First off, I do want to say thanks for having me on. I mean, I did listen to your first 3 podcasts, and I have to say, compared to your other guests like Greg, Jan, and Nazi, I mean, they've accomplished a lot more in chess than I have, so I do feel a bit humbled to be doing this already. I started playing when I was pretty young, around 4.5, and I never really took it seriously when I was younger, but I was already playing in like national events when I was like 10, 11, 12 years old, and I was doing pretty well for my age group, but never figured it was something that I would do long term, or especially not a career. It always was some kind of a strange hobby to me.
This was in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I grew up and was raised in Los Angeles, and we would travel a bit for like national scholastic tournaments. I remember going to like Arizona a lot, I think Kentucky once, Florida, kind of all over the country. And
what was the mechanism that got you into tournaments? Did your parents teach you, or did you learn at school?
I learned from my grandfather, and from there I took an interest. My brother was also playing, who's 2 years older than me, and my dad used to play back in the Soviet Union. My family's all from Ukraine, by the way, and we started getting like some random like group lessons kind of all over Los Angeles. I remember I was working with a bunch of different coaches. I didn't have one specific coach when I was younger, but I would go to a lot of like group lessons. One is Coach Jay Stallings, who I don't know if you know, but runs a really amazing program out near Santa Barbara, I think, in California. And I remember going to his lessons a lot, going to other lessons. And from there we started playing in like local scholastic tournaments. And we did okay, I think. I don't really remember, but I remember winning a trophy like almost every weekend or every 2 weekends or so. So eventually we started competing like more national events.
Okay, and did you stick with it throughout your childhood?
Kind of, not really. When I was around 12 or 13, I already kind of started losing interest. So I was still playing in tournaments every once in a while, but really wasn't taking it seriously. And then when I was 13, I also entered college very early through the early entrance program. So I was going to Cal State University of Los Angeles, enrolled in the school as a full-time student. And then chess really took a backseat as just something that I kind of used to do, or just this random hobby. And I was just kind of focusing on school. And then I got back into it around when I was about 15.
Okay, we'll come back to that, but I have to say a couple of things. I came across something that said you went to college when you were 13 in your research, and it's funny to me that you downplay your accomplishments, because you went to college when you were 13. You got an MBA when you're 21. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
And you wrote a chess book already somehow. So the 500 pages too, I might add.
It was long. Yeah.
I try to prepare for these interviews, but I was unable to read your 550-page chess book in time for this, so I apologize.
Oh, that's a shame.
But it actually it looks really good. I'm going to read it because it's right up my alley. But we'll talk about this more later. But based on what I saw your video out. I agree with what you say about opening approach, but we'll get back to that. I just wanted to throw that in terms of your downplaying your accomplishments. But let's talk now about you're getting back into chess when you're 15.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. I don't think it was such a huge accomplishment. It was just this program that exists in the Cal State University, and it wasn't designed for like super geniuses or anything like that. It's more for kids who are just kind of mature enough and didn't need to spend 4 years in high school. So we took a few extra classes to kind of make up for the subjects we missed. And if you're like kind of psychologically ready to go to college and deal with that environment, then that's what it was for. And I'm really happy I did that.
How do they judge whether or not you're mature enough? Or is that just your own determination?
In the program, they do, before you're enrolled, they give you a summer of classes, since we were on the quarter system. So you take 2 classes over the summer. In the meantime, they give you like interviews, and there's also like this lounge. It was a big program, so you go and you hang out, and there's about 150 kids. And the people in charge of the program, they kind of interview you a little bit, see what your motivation is, what you want to achieve, and kind of sorts itself out that way.
Wow. And are you mixed in with 18-year-old college kids, or are you in your own section with the other youngsters?
I think the first year or so, you were just taking like the general education courses, and they try to put you in with all of the kids that enroll with you. So there was about 30 kids in my year. After that, everyone chooses their major. So we started taking courses with like regular age school kids.
And okay, so let's get back to the chess. So at 15, are you on a 4-year track in college, or do you do that more quickly as well?
It's actually a bit longer because we had some extra classes to take. So most kids, they take about 5 years.
Okay.
And they encouraged us to like take the summers off and pursue other activities. So for me, that would have been chess. So yeah, when I was, I think I was 15, and my rating was about, I don't remember, but it was between like 1800, 2000. So I'd been progressing, but really not much. There was news that Bobby Fischer had died. And I remember it was, as you can imagine, a very big deal across the chess world. And then I started like reading about him and his story and what he accomplished and his route to the world championship and all that stuff. And then I became like fascinated with chess culture and chess history. So until that point, I had no idea that there was such a rich history. Like I'd heard about some world champions and stuff. I had heard that Fischer was this amazing player, but I really had no idea to what extent and how important chess was way back then. So that kind of like inspired me to pursue it again.
So were there any books that you read that stand out, or was it mostly just sort of internet research? Back
then it was like internet research. I think I probably read a chess-based obituary or something, and then started reading more about him. I think the first real chess book I read was probably Fischer's 60 Memorable Games, which I really liked. And from there I started getting into like more serious chess books.
Well, I would say that one's fairly serious, but you're saying that was a springboard for other serious chess books?
Yeah, I mean, that one was just like, okay, I wanted to know more about him and about his chess. Wasn't necessarily to like improve my play, although I'm sure I learned a lot from the book. Okay.
So to be, you said about 1900 at the age of 15? And so we're 9 years later, and you just got the international master title. That's pretty impressive. How frequently did you start to study once your interest was rekindled?
I started studying a lot, maybe 2 hours a day, maybe more on the weekend. Not exactly sure, but I had been working with Grandmaster Varakobian. At that point, it had already been a few years that I was taking lessons from him. But I still wasn't very serious. It was just like a thing to do. Like you take guitar lessons and tennis lessons and then also chess lessons or whatever. And then I really started to take the lessons a lot more seriously. And I started actually like reading books and training on my own, working on my calculation. And then I hit 2200, I think, maybe a year later. I think I was 16. And that was a result of just working a bit more and also just taking the game more seriously when I was playing, like really trying hard at the board and like not being intimidated by high rated players and trying not to miss chances and that kind of thing.
Okay, and meanwhile, you're still going to school. So you graduated after 5 years, so you would have been 18.
Mm-hmm.
And then what did you do after you graduated?
So after I graduated, I spent about, I think, a year teaching chess. So I was working for a couple like school programs and teaching chess in like after school programs in Los Angeles. And then I was also kind of just working on my own chess at the time, trying to like find strong tournaments and play in those. And then at a certain point, I got involved with Metropolitan Chess, which was a company in Los Angeles that originally our goal was to start running a series of IM and GM norm tournaments because there really weren't very many in California. And eventually we expanded to be a publishing company and to run regular tournaments. And now we're even doing scholastic programs as well.
Great. And how do you enjoy teaching chess?
Back then, I didn't like it at all, to be honest. It was just something I was doing for money. And after about a year, I actually just quit because it was kind of draining all my energy to work with like really young kids who, of course, didn't appreciate chess like most chess players do. And to me, it just felt more of like a babysitting job than actually teaching. So I quit because I felt like it was really getting in the way of my own progress when it came to chess. But recently, about, I'd say, a year ago, maybe a year and a half, I started getting back into teaching, and I've kind of found a love for it because I think teaching chess well, I think, is really rewarding. And I've even gotten back to school programs, and I think I found a way to work in schools and still deal with very young children, but actually enjoy what I'm doing just through like I think a change in mindset, I think.
Is there anything you do concretely differently in terms of your approach, or is it all just based on, as you said, your mindset going in?
I think the frame is kind of the most important thing. So to me, when you're teaching in after school programs, the first thing you have to realize is like, these kids are not, they didn't sign up for some serious chess school. They just want to have fun. They just had a whole day of school. So the way I look at it is that you're really just teaching them how to think critically and how to think logically. And you're using the game of chess as like an example. So we always focus on teaching, of course, patterns, but also how to think about the game and how to identify different patterns. And to me, it's really just about like a mental toughness kind of class rather than a specific chess class. So I think that really helped a lot because then I'm not too concerned that like, oh, they're not becoming, amazing chess players, but they are still gaining a lot just from learning how to think critically about the game and learn from their mistakes and all the sportsmanship stuff, which I think is just as important.
I think that's you hit on something really important in there, I think, and I think it's good advice for any chess teachers listening. As you know, I think I also teach chess, and it's hard. Mm-hmm. It's a challenge. Exactly what you say is a challenge. You have to find the balance between wanting kids to improve and also wanting them to enjoy it. But I sometimes feel like when you try to teach them chess history, it pushes them away rather than draws them in a lot of the time. I don't know if you've had that experience.
Well, I feel like kids, they love hearing about specific players. I don't know, that for some reason the story of the game, at least in my experience, is always what they're more interested in. They want to know like who was white, who was black, were they a good player, and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes I'll show some of my own games in class, and they always want to know, like, if my opponent was sweating or if they were, like, unhappy with the game or like all the tidbits, I guess.
That makes sense. Kids do love a good story. So let's move forward. So you're still, you played, so 18, you teach for a couple of years. Now you've gotten back into it. But I know from reading you and watching your materials online that you've sort of been producing content online sort of all along. So how did that come about? How did you get interested in writing and producing videos and all of the things that you do online to help people improve at chess?
Yeah, so I don't exactly remember the chronology of everything that I've done, but I started working with chess.com because we were running the IM Norm tournaments with Metropolitan Chess. And one of the events we wanted to do commentary. So we worked with chess.com to set that up, and I was one of the commentators. And of course I did terrible. It was my first time. But I think it was I am David Pruis, who he and Danny Wrench were like kind of leading the content team at that point. I think he said something like I had like potential for commentary, and then I started doing some videos for chess.com, writing some articles for them. And that's kind of how I got into working with them. Also, at some point, I got involved with the, of course, you know about the U.S. Chess League.
Yes, the Pro Chess League.
Now it's the Pro Chess League, of course. So back then, I remember starting a blog, and I would just kind of recap all the week's action, and it was just kind of a fun thing I was doing where I would write like what I thought was the game of the week, what I thought was the most exciting match, the best move, all this stuff. And then kind of out of nowhere, Jen Shahade emailed me and said, do you want to do these recaps for US Chess? Or at the time it was Chess Life Online. And that's how I got into writing for US Chess. So I started doing the recaps for the US Chess League. Then I moved on to like doing tournament recaps. Like if I traveled to a tournament in Las Vegas, for example, I would then also write a recap of the event. And then eventually, once I started getting some of my own success, I started writing about that for US Chess as well.
And as I said, I really enjoyed your videos, and I wouldn't, you know, if I didn't like your videos or I didn't like your writing, I just wouldn't say anything about it. But I'm not.
Oh, sure.
I'm not just saying that just because you're a guest. Your videos on chess.com are very clear. You're a very good communicator. They're well presented, and on top of that, I also noticed you're a good writer. So I was curious if how you developed your writing skills, or if it's just something that comes fairly naturally to you. It's
a little crazy because I honestly have never ever considered myself a good writer. Like I didn't read a whole lot of books as a kid. I was never interested in reading anything outside of like Harry Potter. So I feel like I never developed my vocabulary. I never studied writing. But somehow a lot of people, they come up to me in tournaments and they say like, oh, I really like your writing, and I keep getting writing gigs and all this stuff. But I truly don't consider myself a good writer. Every time I send in an article, I feel like this is the one that people are just going to gloss over and not like. I think my one advantage, I guess, is that I'm very willing to be open in my writing. So I try to communicate a lot of the emotion that I'm experiencing during an event. And hopefully I think people can relate to that, because I think a lot of chess players by and large are pretty similar in terms of like the emotions they experience. Yeah, and I think that your readers are going to be at different levels in terms of chess ability, so they may or may not be able to follow the calculations. They may or may not have the time to get out a board and really follow along in a game. But when you talk about the emotional swings of a tournament or your development in chess, that's something that
anyone who's spent any time pursuing the game can relate to. So I do think that it's a strong feature of your writing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things about the chess world is that everyone, like, once they reach a certain level of, like, I don't know, 1,000, like even a very low class player, they know what it's like to make a dumb blunder, and they know what it's like to make a brilliancy. Now, what that means to them is very different to, like, an elite grandmaster, of course. But I think, yeah, the feeling there, the emotion there is exactly the same for both players, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, so let's move forward in time. I think our only remaining stop before we can start talking about your life right now, which I'm eager to talk about, but how did you end up getting an MBA already?
I was still in Los Angeles and a bit at a loss of, like, what to do, because I had already decided I wanted to have a career in chess, but I wasn't sure exactly how to achieve that, mainly because I was, like, I don't know, 19 years old and only 2,300. I mean, really nothing special. You know, there's no way I could be like a top level player. I'm just too old at this point to really get to that level. And then I was playing a tournament in St. Louis, the Spice Cup Open, which is really strong event organized by Susan Polgar and Paul Trung and their organization. It's one of those super Swisses where it's like you have to be at least 2,000 FIDE to get in, maybe 2,100, and it's closed to like 50 or 60 players. So it's just a really strong event, excellent for norm opportunity. So while I was there, my coach, Akobian, introduced me to this guy who ran the Lindenwood University chess program. And Lindenwood University, they basically recruited me to join for the next year, because they wanted to establish a really strong chess team. They wanted to compete with Webster University, which, as you know, is incredibly strong, and the other schools in Dallas and Baltimore and so on. So they already had a pretty strong team, but they were just looking for more players. I wasn't doing anything particularly great in Los Angeles. I also wanted to just move out of the city because I grew up there and I was kind of bored of it. And so here was an opportunity to move to Missouri, get an MBA, which wasn't the most important thing to me, but I figured that wouldn't hurt. In case chess did fall through, that would be a nice thing to fall back on. And it was only, I think, like 15 months, the entire program. So even if it didn't work out, it wasn't such a huge time commitment. And that could be closer to St. Louis, which at this point is doing truly amazing things for chess. Like, they've already run a couple of U.S. championships at this point, and they're starting to run these high-level events. Like, I don't think they had already done the Sinkfield Cup yet, but I think that was maybe a year or two after I got to St. Louis. So it was just a good opportunity, kind of fit at that point, and I went for it.
Dan, did this cost you any money, or were you able to utilize your chess cred to not have to pay tuition?
So I did get a chess scholarship from Lindenwood, but in addition to the scholarship, I also had to work on campus in, like, the student store, the spirit shop, as they called it. So I got a full tuition scholarship based on that, and then I had to pay for an apartment outside of campus, which was really cheap because this was out in St. Charles. So the rent was, compared to California and New York, I mean, the rent was pretty amazing and not bad at all.
And did you have any chess income at this point, or not at that moment?
Yeah, I continued to, like, do maybe a few online lessons, but most of my income came from either chess.com or random articles, and then I think I just had a bunch of, like, random chess jobs that I did for just a little bit of income, but it didn't take much to live off there.
Okay, and this was about 3 years ago, is that right?
Yeah, I started at the beginning of 2013. So I guess it would be 4 years now. Almost.
Okay. And when you finished up, did you go straight back to LA?
Yeah, so I graduated in like spring of 2014. I moved back to Los Angeles, and I continued to work for Metropolitan Chess, and I took a larger role as director of marketing. And we continued to expand on our publishing business. At this point, I was also working on my chess book pretty seriously. Actually, this is a project that started, I think, in the middle of 2012, and we only completed it towards the end of 2015.
Wow, that's incredible.
Mm-hmm. But we were working on and off. So, of course, this is a big opening book on the Open Sicilian. So it's a complete repertoire for white. So as you saw, is quite a ton of work. And my writing partner was I.M. Zhanibek-Amanov, who had moved to Los Angeles a few years earlier and had been helping us with the I.M. Norm tournaments. So he was a big expert in the Open Sicilian. He'd been playing it all his life. I didn't know anything, but I did. I guess I could say I was kind of like the writing guy. So we worked through a lot of the lines. We just did a ton of research, in ChessBase and reading books on the Sicilian, watching some DVDs. We then chose the repertoire. We figured out our opening philosophy, like how we want to present the book and all that stuff. And then we kind of just worked on it slowly, so it took a while. And then in 2015, we redid a lot of it just because the theory had updated in a lot of the lines. So that part took less time, but it was still a hefty amount of work. Was that a source of frustration that you had to do that, or expected? It was frustrating at first, but then I was like, well, I want to write a good chess book. So if this is what it takes, then, let's do it. Okay. And can you mentioned your opening philosophy, and you've written about it and spoken about it in your videos, but for our listeners who haven't heard it, do you mind talking about it a little bit? Oh, sure. Yeah. I don't think it's anything groundbreaking. I'm sure this is something I've either stole or, kind of molded from grandmasters that, kind of other philosophies that made sense to me. But basically, I think when you're playing the opening, your main goal is to reach a middle game, not necessarily where you have some kind of objective advantage, but where you're just familiar with the ideas and the common plans and the position. I think that's really what's most important for players. All the way up to the elite levels. I think it was probably Anand. I've heard in a lot of his interviews when he talks about like opening preparation, he rarely talks about like computer evaluations or anything like that, but rather he says like, oh, this is a middle game where I'm familiar with the ideas and themes, and even if I don't remember all the lines, he'll say like I can still work out the details just by knowing the thematic ideas. For example, you probably remember his brilliancy against Aronian in Wykonze a few years ago in the Semislav. I don't. I'm ashamed to say, but go on. Oh, no worries. So he played this brilliancy. I think maybe 2014 or 2015 against Aronian. It was just like really remarkable game, and a lot of it was opening preparation, as he revealed, but it wasn't necessarily preparation he memorized, but he still had to work it out at the board. So he's talking about how important it was to really understand the opening and the common middle game themes. It also helps to be Anand. So, not a minor matter when it comes to figuring out what to do in the position, even knowing the ideas. But your point is well taken overall. Anyway, continue. Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, of course, he's a brilliant calculator. And then in this other speech he gave, I remember a point that really stuck with me, where he said, when it comes to the opening, you'd rather. I'm definitely paraphrasing here, but he said, you'd rather be confident and delusional than know the truth about the position and be skeptical, like about your chances. So he was basically saying, you'd rather get a position where perhaps someone told you, like, okay, you have a big initiative here, even if you don't know for sure, because at the board you'll be a lot more confident and you'll play a lot better, versus knowing whatever the computer valuation is and knowing that objectively you have no advantage. And then at the board, you're like demoralized, basically.
It's like the placebo effect.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think for players of lower levels, especially around 1600, 1800, 2000, I think the advantage is for players who truly understand the middle game. And that's why so many players, in my opinion, they love the Sicilian Dragon so much, or they love the King's Indian, is because even if they don't know all the theory in the opening, they can get a middle game and they're familiar with all the themes, because these are such like bright attacking themes that they can still play the middle game at a very high level. And I think that's what players should be searching for. Yeah.
Also, they should be searching, if you're not going to be a professional, you want chess to be fun. So you should play things that bring joy into your life.
Yeah. And to touch on that, it's like, once a player reaches a grandmaster level, at that point they start thinking about, okay, how do I really equalize with black and hold the draw? I have to be very solid and play the Berlin or the Petrov and all this stuff. But anyone below that level, I don't think they should be copying like these super GM openings, because the goal, again, should not be just to equalize, just to get some equal position, but to get a position where, again, you understand what you're trying to do, and you understand how you're going to get counterplay and all the common ideas and stuff. So with that whole philosophy in mind, that's how we chose a lot of our repertoire on the Sicilian, because a lot of the lines we chose wouldn't be considered like the sharpest, most theoretical lines, but every line we chose came with a bunch of instructive games that we analyze and show, like, okay, these are the ideas, this is what white is playing for, this is like the common breaks and tactics you have to watch out for. And I don't know, I think we were successful.
Great. And I'm guessing as a chess book, this didn't end up being a wildly profitable venture for you?
Oh, no, I hesitate to even count the number of hours I spent versus how much I received for it. But I think it helped me in a lot of intangible ways. I mean, for one, definitely met people who didn't know my name until they read the book. And as far as my own chess goes, I mean, I learned a ton about not only the Sicilian, but about middle games and strategies in general, just from studying, all the games. I mean, I looked at countless of GM level Sicilian games to research the book, and I think that was extremely beneficial for my own chess.
Makes sense. Do you think you'll write another chess book in the future?
I have some random ideas, but I'm also a little bit skeptical. To me, I feel like chess books are slowly going out of fashion, because now like chess.com and chess24 are so wildly popular that there's a lot of ways to learn chess without specifically using chess books. But I am very happy that many great books are still being produced even this year.
Yeah, and even the opening trainers, like to be able to quiz yourself on your phone is just an amazing breakthrough in technology compared to the way that I had to learn openings.
Right, absolutely.
Okay, so let's move forward to your recent pursuit for the International Master title. You've been writing about it in Chess Life, so those of us in the U.S., I think a lot of people will be familiar with the story. Those overseas may not, but you've been very vocal about how badly you want the International Master title, and beyond that, the Grandmaster title. And it's as you mentioned earlier, it's refreshing to read, just sort of, it's the hero's journey in action to read you going through these trials and tribulations, and now you finally won the title. So what led to that success? How have you been spending your time leading up to this? How have you continued to improve at chess?
It's funny you call it a hero's journey, because it has felt like a very spiritual process. Going through like the highs and lows, and it has very much felt like a journey. I guess I started chasing the title back in I don't know, a few years after I started taking chess really seriously. So maybe 2010, 2011, I started to believe that maybe I could get to IM and even GM. So I started playing in a lot of norm tournaments, and I tried to just get a lot of experience playing against strong players. I think my first breakthrough came, I want to say it was 2011, maybe it was 2010, but I played the big open tournament in Reno that they hold every year, and I had a really nice performance. I beat Enrico Sevillano, who at the time was an IM, but considered by many to be GM level, and now of course he is a Grandmaster. And then in the next round I beat Grandmaster Alex Ivanov. And then in the final round I drew another GM, and I ended just having a really amazing performance. And then I felt like, it was possible for me to actually play at a high level. At that point, I also wrote a nice article for US Chess about the breakthrough and what I did to study and improve. And yeah, over the years, it's been a constant struggle because when I have the time, I do try to train very hard, and I'd be happy to go into the specific training techniques, I guess, if you want. But a lot of, for me at least, the improvement in chess, it's there's a lot of ups and downs because you can have very, very bad tournaments where you really just don't understand what happened or why you're off form. And then when you have good tournaments, of course, you feel on top of the world. And I think what people underestimate a lot of times in chess is the importance of mental strength. And I know you and Nazi talked about this a little bit in the previous episode. And to kind of add to that, I feel like every player has a kind of range in chess. On any given day, they can play either, I think on average, 200 points below their level and 200 points above. And I think for some players, that range is a lot greater. And for others, it's a lot tighter. They're much more solid and consistent. If you look at the very top level and you take a player like Ivanchuk, this is someone who, at this point, everyone knows he can play like a total genius in one tournament and completely collapse in the next tournament. Whereas if you take someone, I don't know exactly who, but okay, in recent times, Geary, has very, very consistent performance.
Yeah, Kramnik.
And I think or Kramnik, although Kramnik, I'd say, has really stepped it up a notch in his latest years, just playing very, very sharp and interesting chess. So what I think a lot of players should work on is trying to do their best to put themselves in good form mentally before a tournament. And a lot of that is specifically, I think, your expectations for the tournament, how you deal with losses, I think is really important. I'm definitely someone who takes losses pretty badly. I'll get really depressed and I'll just kind of just live in self-pity for a little while. And it's important to figure out what works for you so that you can get back on the horse and try again and not lose faith. So I was working a lot and I was training a lot, and my first norm came in 2014 at the that year's version of the Spice Cup Open. And that was a very solid tournament for me. And at that point, I already felt like I was good enough to at least get an IM performance, even if I didn't truly believe I was IM strength yet. And obviously getting the norm gave me a lot of confidence to start working again quite a bit and training and hoping to of course achieve the title. And I didn't have a coach at the time because I just felt like there's so many great chess books out there and there's so many things I could do that I didn't really need a coach to tell me like, okay, you need to read a lot of chess books and work on your calculation and work on your openings all the time. It was pretty obvious to me what I needed to do. So I kept working, and I missed a couple norm chances here and there. And what really kept me going was that ultimately, I knew and I still know that my ultimate goal is to become a grandmaster. So if I miss an IM norm in some tournament, it's bad and it should be upsetting, but it's a very small step in the larger picture, I guess. My ultimate ambitions are much higher than just getting an IM norm or the IM title. So I think that really helped me with not taking a bad performance too much too hard and just going back to training and just continuing the journey. So then my second norm came at the end of 2015, North American Open in Las Vegas. And I felt like I played really well there. Especially my resilience in that tournament was good because if I had won in round 8 against a really strong young player, Nicholas Cheka, I would have clinched the norm outright. And I had black, and we played this sharp game, and I achieved a completely winning endgame, something that like a lot of players would, at least in my level, be able to win in a very straightforward fashion. In computer terms, it was like -3, -4. And then I totally relaxed and allowed him some counterplay, and he ended up drawing the game. Actually, I was lucky to draw the game because I had to hold rook and knight versus rook with like no time and 5-second delay for 50 moves. So that was definitely a tough experience for me.
Sounds fun.
Actually, to be honest, rook and knight versus rook is much easier defense than rook and bishop versus rook. And I had already done it before in a tournament, so I wasn't too nervous at that point. But what was more upsetting is that I blew a winning position. And the next morning, I was expecting to get white, but I was paired black against another strong player, around 2400 level. And this time I had to draw to achieve the norm. And so I just prepared a lot for that game, and I kind of half expected not to get it, half expected to make it. And I just kind of felt like, okay, well, whatever happens, I'm still on this journey. This is still what I want. This isn't going to affect anything in the long run. So I managed to draw that game. Actually, it was a lot easier than I expected. We drew after like 20 moves because I equalized pretty easily, and then he offered a draw. So then I had 2 norms, and at this point I was already planning a trip to Europe with my roommate and good chess player Tom Riccardi, who's a national master. Actually, Ben, you're in Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah,
I heard.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, he just recently moved there as well to attend dental school.
I'll keep an eye out for him. The name rings a bell, but the way the chess world works, every name rings a bell a little bit. So
sure, absolutely, yeah. So one thing we didn't really mention is that I moved up to the Bay Area, just outside of San Francisco in the South Bay, in spring 2015, and it's kind of a funny story. So Tom and I were in the same age group growing up, so we played in all the same national events and in the same level. Like I remember actually seeing his name in like the second grade championships, third grade championships, fourth grade, and all this stuff. And I believe we played once, but I can't confirm that 100%.
So that means you didn't win, right?
No, honestly, I have a memory of playing and upsetting him because I believe he was high rated at the time. But then I tried to find the game in like the USTF database and I couldn't do it. So I don't know. And also I should say actually Caruana is also in our age group. So I remember seeing Caruana's name at the top of our standings back when we were really young. But Tom and I never spoke. We never really met. And then we randomly saw each other at this Blitz tournament at the Mechanics Chess Club. And we were even paired, and we played. And then he reached out to me a few months later because he was kind of on a gap here. He wanted to pursue chess. We started studying chess together. And then we started planning a trip to Europe to play a bunch of tournaments at the beginning of 2016. There's a lot of like random timelines I just realized in my chess life.
Well, we're almost caught up, so let's you can't stop now.
Yeah.
I want to hear about the Europe trip, so keep going.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So the Europe trip started with the Gibraltar Open, which is famous for being an incredibly strong open. And since I had just gotten my second norm in Vegas, of course, I was shooting for my third norm. And leading up to the trip, we had been living together, so we started working on chess a lot, almost every day, basically. In our apartment, we had a chessboard set up 24/7. We would like set up endgame studies for each other. I mean, we were really working on chess a lot. So my confidence was very, very high going into the trip. And Gibraltar, I did quite well, and it's a 10-round tournament. In round 9, I had a chance to get a norm. All I needed was a draw with black against I believe she's now a grandmaster from China, but at the time I think she only had the WGM title and was rated about 2,500 FIDE, so clearly grandmaster level. This was Tan Zhongyi. I'm probably mispronouncing her name, but I got a pretty decent endgame, and I felt like I could only play for 2 results, either a win or a draw. And I totally relaxed. She started improving her position, and then ended up losing the game pretty tragically. In the next round, I could still gain the norm with a win, but I had to beat another grandmaster, and it was just not happening with white after such a disappointing result. So I didn't get the norm there, and over the next 3 tournaments, I never had such a concrete norm chance, but I would do okay and then kind of mess up towards the second half of the tournament. We also played in Capelle Legrand, which runs a big open tournament every year, as well as the Cannes Chess Festival, and we ended with the Reykjavik Open, which also is a very successful and big open tournament held annually. So it was kind of a big disaster, I would say, the Europe trip as far as chess goes. Travel-wise, it was great. Like, I got to see a bunch of Europe. We stopped in Belgium for a week because we had a break in between tournaments. I was really glad I traveled and got to see so much of Europe. But of course, from a chess perspective, it's pretty disappointing.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not the only one to tell you that now is the time in your life for you to do things like that. I think it's great, and to have something productive to do in between and play chess, I think is even more commendable. I was curious about the finances of what you're doing, because teaching chess, especially for someone who's young and a good communicator like you, I think it's obviously totally viable as a career, but taking time to go and play definitely takes away from that. So I'm just curious how you're able to make it work. Is it a struggle, or are you able to sort of seamlessly blend it into your schedule?
Well, the great thing about making most of my money from teaching chess is that I can take breaks whenever I want to go play. So, I would never be able to do that if I had some kind of real job. You can take off maybe a week, but to take off 2 months to go on this crazy chess trip, I think very few employers would allow that. So, yeah, I saved up a bit of money. I also started working for a company called Bay Area Chess, and I started doing a lot of after-school teaching for them, as well as teaching some of their group classes that they hold at their club. And they also gave me some private students as well that I kind of was introduced to through working with them. And this allowed me to save up a bit of money and just fund the whole trip. It was pretty expensive. But for a 2-month Europe trip, I mean, I think that's not bad. Like, definitely a pretty amazing experience.
Yeah, definitely worthwhile. Is this something you're gonna? I know that you ultimately are hoping to earn the Grandmaster title. So, are you planning more? Not actively planning, but do you think you'll take more trips like this in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, earlier this year, I also went to Europe for the Isle of Man International, which was held just in October. And I definitely want to go back to Europe because there's, I saw so little of it. There's still so many great tournaments to play in and so many places I could see. So I'm definitely just a huge fan of being able to travel and play chess. I think that's kind of the best thing a chess player could be doing.
Yeah, especially as I was saying, at your stage in life, I think it's something that you'll remember fondly for a long time.
Totally, yeah.
So I got a tip that you're into improv comedy from Greg. Is that true?
So that was back when I was 15 or 16. I was living in Los Angeles, so I've always been a big fan of Hollywood, and I remember I was watching a lot of like stand-up comedy growing up. And then at one point randomly, my friends and I were walking through the 3rd Street Promenade out in Santa Monica. We got pulled in to see this like random stand-up comedy show where it's like $5 a ticket, like very cheap. And all of a sudden I got super interested into stand-up. And then I started talking with the guys of the show. I was already, I was kind of the funny one among my friends, so to speak. I was very interested in doing comedy, so they invited me to try it. I did a couple of stand-up shows. And then I got into improv, which is really, really big in Los Angeles now, through the UCB Theater, which stands for the Upright Citizens Brigade. So they started out in Chicago, then they built a big successful theater in New York, and then I think over 10 years now, they built a theater in LA and started teaching improv. So that was a ton of fun. I've always liked comedy, and I really like doing improv. I would perform at random, like, tiny little theaters across town. I had a couple of improv troupes and everything. And actually, the reason I stopped doing it was because it started conflicting with the chess. There's a bunch of improv festivals each year, and then at a certain point I realized, like, I had to choose between going to an improv festival or going to a chess tournament because they would just conflict. And then I kind of realized I had to choose one or the other and pursue it full time. It was kind of a hard decision, actually, but eventually I went with chess and stopped doing comedy mostly.
Well, chess is definitely a smaller pond to swim in, I would say.
I wasn't sure where it would be easier to succeed. At least chess, it felt more concrete, like where if you could work on it a lot, you should get some success. Whereas in comedy, it seems like you need a bit of luck in addition to a lot of talent and even more hard work. But it was really, honestly, the community. I really like the chess community a lot more than the stand-up community, to be honest.
How are they different?
Well, I don't want to say anything disparaging, but to me, the chess community seemed a lot more inclusive, and also I felt like the people I met were a lot more genuine. There's definitely people I met in the comedy scene who were like very, very typically like LA fake, as you could imagine, like very phony, always networking. And that bothered me, that I thought I might have to turn into one of those people one day if I really wanted to succeed. It was probably a very, very naive and 16-year-old perspective of it all, but that's how I felt at the time.
Do you think that the improv has helped your chess teaching?
I'd say definitely, yeah. Like, I remember we did a lot of work on, I guess, like recalling information that you've heard before. A lot of times when people are doing an improv scene, they're not just like making funny stuff up, 100% of the time, but they're drawing from their own experience and then using it in the scene. So I think that helps with teaching because it really helped like my memory and my recall actually, as far as like, oh yeah, I saw this one game once, or I heard this thing or this bit of advice that can be useful here. So it really it's a lot easier to think on my feet, especially when I'm giving a lecture. And if I don't know exactly what I'm going to say, I think some players might get nervous if they don't have it fully prepared. But for me, I think I'm pretty comfortable when I don't have like a prepared lecture or topic.
And do you try to be funny when you're teaching the kids?
With the kids, yeah, I mean, I do try to keep it light and interesting. I don't have any, I guess, like specific bits or jokes that I do, but there's always fun ways to banter and interact with the kids. But I'd say for most good teachers, that comes pretty naturally.
Okay, so as we record this, you're getting ready to head to the North American Open. What else do you have on the horizon for upcoming tournaments? I know the Pro Chess League starting soon. Yeah,
so other than the Vegas tournament, which I assume will be over by the time this comes out,
yes,
I don't have any tournaments planned at the moment. I'll be playing the U.S. Amateur Team West with Bay Area Chess. We're going to be making a lot of teams using our coaches and our students. But yeah, the big thing is the Pro Chess League, which is just starting in the beginning of January. I helped organize the team for San Jose, which is a really, really strong team, and we're using all of BAC's Bay Area Chess, all of their coaches and students on the team. So that's very exciting. With the exception of one, our top guy Mamedyarov is not affiliated with the club, but we had a direct connection to him.
That would be amazing if you were teaching after school chess somewhere.
No, but another grandmaster from Azerbaijan, Raf Mamedov, who's incredibly strong in his own right. I mean, well up in the 2600s. He's done like some lectures and some classes for BAC in the past. So we asked him to join the team. He agreed. He reached out to Mamedyarov and got him to sign on as well. In addition to those two, BAC has Daniel Naroditsky, who's an incredibly strong player and recently started teaching some of the higher rated classes, as well as Grandmaster Christian Karilla, who's also a very, very good player living in the Bay Area.
So where do you guys get the money to pay someone like Mamedyarov?
That actually, I don't know. I'm not involved in the finances of the group.
I'm very curious about that. I couldn't get an answer out of Greg on that one either, so I'm just going to keep plugging away.
If I knew and could tell you, I would. Or if I knew and couldn't tell you, I would tell you that I can't tell you that. But I truly just don't know. I know we started some fundraising campaigns and we have gotten some donations so far, but I don't know exactly how much.
Oh yeah, I don't care particularly how much money each player is making. I'm more curious about the mechanisms of where the money is coming from. Like you, my general goal is just for chess to be more popular. So, when people are actually managing to get the money together to get elite players to compete for their teams, I'm curious who they went to and how they sold them and stuff like that. Well, I'll get someone on here eventually who can answer this. So.
Right, fair enough.
Okay, well, I can't think of any more questions. I mean, I'm very eager to see how your career continues to develop. Yeah, I'm really impressed with what you've done in chess, but also just how you present yourself and how you're sort of shaping a career out of it. I think it's a really good example for obviously up-and-coming chess players, but even old men like me can learn a lot from your approach to teaching and just how you handle your business. So congratulations on that.
Oh, thanks a lot. I mean, I have to say I've gotten a lot of help. Number one, like support from my parents, because at one point they kind of accepted that I wanted to be a chess player, and they started supporting me. Not just financially, but also like emotionally. And I feel like I've gotten a lot of breaks from people within the chess world. Like, I remember Greg Shahade invited me to a U.S. chess school when I was like 16 or 17 and like 2200. I remember just emailing him, and I was like very eager to join because I thought it would be really, really good for my chess. So he definitely helped me out with doing that and inviting me to future schools as well. And there have just been tons of people, I feel like, throughout my chess career that have like given me the nod or like some kind of helped me out with some gig or some connection or something. So believe me, I didn't do it on my own.
Well, no one accomplishes anything entirely on their own, but I'm sure that you deserve a bit of the credit yourself as well.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Sure. Well, thanks for coming on. I'd love to catch up sometime in the future. I really enjoyed hearing your story, and wish you luck in Vegas. By the time people hear this, they'll be able to look to see how you did. So good luck. And rest up.
Yeah, I really hope I don't tank it.
We'll still hold you in high regard either way.
Right. Well, yeah. Thanks so much for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Great. Anytime.
Yeah. If I could plug something.
Oh yeah. Sorry. By all means.
No worries. I'd love for people to connect with me on Twitter, or on chess.com. My username across all platforms, I think, is pretty simple. It's just hello Kostya. So if you're on Twitter, please feel free to reach out. Also
buy his book. As I said, I haven't read it yet, but clearly it's going to be great.
Sure, yeah. And if you're in the 1400 through 2400 range and interested in the Sicilian, please check it out. It's called Modernized, the Open Sicilian, and it's on Amazon.
Okay. Well, and I'll, like I said, I look forward to checking it out myself. All right. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks for listening to Perpetual Chess. To hear more episodes, give feedback, or suggest guests, go to perpetualchesspod.com. If you like the show, please help me out by telling your friends and giving me a high rating on iTunes. I'll be back next week with another episode of the Perpetual Chess Podcast.